Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Victor Mercado. I'm Director of Public Information here in the Sunnyside School District. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being at our event, Comunidad. We try to do this once a year. It's just an annual event to get everybody in community come out to our schools. And we're very excited tonight. We have a very exciting panel. I'm going to let Patrick do the introductions. But again, I want to just, first of all, thank our state sponsor, Raytheon, and also our media sponsor, the Arizona Daily Star and La Estrella de Tucson. Thank you so much for being here. I think you're gonna definitely love this conversation tonight. Our goal in the months ahead and next year is to be able to take this conversation out into the community in different spaces. So we already have folks in community that have invited us out, so we can continue to have really important discussions around public education, so folks know what's happening. All right. Thank you so much. Without any further ado, Patrick.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick Robles, and thank you all for being here. I'm the very proud student body president, and bienvenidos a Sunnyside. Thank you for joining us for today's main panel discussion on the future of public education. Tonight, we have assembled a very special group of educators, policy experts, and folks in private industry so we can have an intimate conversation about the current state of our schools and hopefully discuss some ideas that will drive the future of the work. Starting from my far left, joining us tonight, we have Dr. Curtis Acosta. He is a high school teacher. He was a high school teacher, for nearly 20 years. Dr. Acosta developed and taught Latinx literature classes for the renowned Mexican American Studies program in TUSD. He is an award-winning educator who was named one of the top 10 Latinos to watch in U.S. politics by the Huffington Post. Dr. Acosta received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Willamette University in Salem, Oregon, and later obtained a Master's of Arts degree and PhD in Language, Reading, and Culture from the University of Arizona in Tucson. He is currently an assistant professor in Language and Culture and Education at the University of Arizona South. He is the founder of the Acosta Educational Partnership, a consultation firm that helps educators create culturally sustaining and humanizing educational practices in their classrooms and schools and communities. Also on our panel, we have Elisa Vasquez. A graduate of the Sunnyside District, Elisa Vasquez joined Ed Leader 21 in January 2017 as project coordinator for the learning team. A native Spanish speaker and also fluent in Portuguese, she has several years of experience in customer service, translation, and interpretation. Elisa was born in Tucson but lived in northern Mexico as a child. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science and Spanish Portuguese from the University of Arizona. At the UA, Elisa was involved in several student organizations, including service as the director of Arizona Model United Nations. She also studied abroad in Brazil and Spain. Elisa loves to travel and enjoys trying new foods. Her life goal is to visit all the wonders of the world. Also joining us tonight is Dr. Lexi Hernandez. She is currently the Director of Diversity and Inclusion with Human Resources at Raytheon Missile Systems, a technology and innovation leader specializing in defense, civil government, and cybersecurity solutions. Raytheon is headquartered in Waltham, Massachusetts. Dr. Hernandez is responsible for determining strategies to achieve the Raytheon Diversity and Inclusion D&I objectives, strategic areas, and high-impact initiatives. Working closely with leaders at all levels, Lexi identifies systemic D&I issues and improvements to enable cultural advances that align with business priorities, growth roadmaps. Lexi joined Raytheon in 2008 and has held a variety of learning, talent development, and organizational effectiveness roles. Dr. Hernandez holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Arizona and a PhD in industrial organizational psychology from the Alliant International University. Joining us tonight is also Dr. Francesca Lopez. She is the Associate Dean of the College of Education, Professor of Educational Policy Studies and Practice, and Director of the Education Policy Center. She began her career in education as a bilingual Spanish-English elementary teacher and later as a high school counselor in El Paso, Texas. Her research is focused on the ways educational settings promote Latino youth, identity, and achievement. Last but not least, joining us tonight is Superintendent Steve Holmes. Steve Holmes serves as the superintendent of the Sunnyside Unified School District, the second largest school district in southern Arizona, with more than 16,000 students and a workforce 2,000 employees strong. Steve is a transformational leader with over 22 years of successful service in public education. He holds a master's in administration, planning, and social policy from Harvard University, where he is a graduate of the Urban Superintendent's Program, USP. Steve is also a graduate of the University of Arizona and an alumnus of the Sunnyside District. A champion for equity, Steve's work focuses on urban ed reform and bringing about deeper learning practices and disruptive innovation to high poverty districts where an emphasis on metrics and incentive structures have become systemic barriers to this type of learning. Mr. Holmes has cultivated partnerships with industry partners to drive more resources to foster innovation and level the playing field by challenging the notion that affluent districts where students are born on third base in a tantamount to hitting an academic triple. As a father of 2 students in Arizona public schools, Mr. Holmes is a staunch supporter of public education and a leading voice and supporter of English language learners. Steve has provided clarity and insight in a numerous national and international conversation, including as a guest keynote for the Ministry of Education in Chile and as a panelist at the National Hispanic Caucus Conference, where he spoke on policy implications for English language learners and the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Mr. Holmes is also a key witness on behalf of the plaintiffs in the landmark case Flores versus Arizona. Steve is an active member of the community, serving as co-chair of the United Way of Southern Arizona Cradle to Career Partnership and as a member of the Tucson Airport Authority. Wow, we have some great panelists tonight. I need to get a swig of water. Let's give them a round of applause. Excuse me. Now we have several rounds of questions, everybody. We will provide our panelists with approximately 4 to 5 minutes to share their thoughts. Now we're going to go ahead and begin by talking about equity. It seems like the concept of equity is front and center, especially given the recent college admissions scandal, where affluent families paved the way for their children to attend colleges and universities. So what does equity look like in public education? How do we ensure a level playing field all around?
I'll go ahead and, since I'm hosting here as the superintendent, I'll let our panelists actually speak on that first.
Do you want to start? Okay, I'll start. So I think that the scandal that we all saw in the news is just, they got caught. I think that it's always been part of education. If we look at history of public education and of higher education in the United States, it's just, we got to see it front and center, they got caught. But the systems, you said it in the introduction, I think that there are people born on third base that have access to these things, and in the system that we're in, where there's so much focus on metrics, and they have access to those kinds of things, they will always be the ones that get to leverage that. And then you have institutions, I work at the University of Arizona, so I'll speak to that are land grant institutions. And the Arizona Constitution made it so that it's supposed to be as free as possible. And it is not as free as possible. I mean, we're in a situation where tuition has doubled over the past several years. So the K-12 defunding that we saw was also something that we saw in higher education. And we see that there are funds. We have funding. It's just not making its way to education. So this is why I'm wearing red today, why we saw so many teachers out wearing red, because it's reached a point where enough is enough. And we're seeing this nationally. So I see this at a K-12 as one of the pieces, but then higher education just perpetuates that, right? The things that teachers are trained to do as professionals, and they're deprofessionalized, and how hard it is to navigate the system. We were having a conversation earlier, even though I work at the University of Arizona, all the obstacles that there are just to try to get in, the paperwork, the different things that if you don't do X, your financial aid won't come in. What happens if you don't get that money? Where are you supposed to live? Students that are evicted, and there's only 2 weeks that support. I mean, so there's all these issues, and it's a public institution, right? We're supposed to be serving the students in our communities. So I know that's a very doom and gloom, but hopefully there'll be happier things to talk about.
So being from Raytheon, I can't exactly talk to it from a public education standpoint, but I can talk to what we're doing as a company, what Raytheon is doing to help with that equity and equality. So first and foremost, Raytheon is a company that strongly values ethics and integrity in everything that we do. So we really instill that as part of our organizational culture. But more practically, in terms of what we do, in terms of how we recruit new employees, how we develop, how we promote, we help to make sure that we are looking at how we can possibly remove bias from those decision-making processes to help create more of a level playing field, helping all employees have that opportunity to thrive and succeed in our organization. So whether it's training for our hiring managers that are actually making the hiring decisions on the forefront, to helping them be aware of how their own personal biases may be impacting the decisions they're making, to ensuring that we have a diverse representation at our senior leadership levels in terms of the individuals that are actually making the policy decisions in our organization, that we're really considering all different types of employee populations as we make those decisions. So we're really trying to do our own due diligence internally to make sure that we're leveling the playing field and making sure that all different types of diverse represented populations, not just ethnicity and gender, but also individuals with different types of educational backgrounds, that all employees have that opportunity to work at Raytheon and succeed.
Well, I was going to say something else and talk about technical stuff, but what you were talking about before about the obstacles that students go through, then I remembered I was one of those students that went through every single one of those obstacles, so I can, talk to that, I honestly, when I was reflecting on it for this panel, I can say I was really fortunate to have someone at Sunnyside and Trio just randomly come and push me to apply to the U of A, to apply to the Arizona Assurance Scholarship, to get me a full ride, because that was something that was not possible for me. So I was fortunate, but not all students are fortunate. So I feel like it's our job to see how we can help those students so that every student can get the opportunity that I got, not just because I got fortunate and I had someone very great there to help me through the whole process and even through college. And I had the support system that I did. Yeah.
I don't think we've really yet dealt with basic truths in our country, and I think that's the basis for all types of inequalities and inequities. So we know, that the idea of bringing up privilege right now it'll get you a hot reaction. But if you historicize things, and we were just talking about this with some of the folks, generational Tucsonenses here that have been through Sunnyside and have been wonderful supporters and parents and students here in Tucson. We know that we've been kept out of spaces for a long time. So Dr. Lopez and I both work at the University of Arizona, and that was a space that is supposed to be, like Dr. Lopez said, a land grant space, university that's supposed to be for all of us, and it hasn't been, and we just don't really deal with that history. And so our antepasados, our generation, our ancestors, our parents and grandparents, they didn't have those opportunities, no matter how brilliant they were, right? It just didn't happen, and we still haven't dealt with that. And we all know of the brilliance of our communities and the brilliance of our families and the brilliance that is here in this school on a daily basis. But there's a large part of this country, and historically in education, both K-12, public education, and higher education, that haven't dealt with our own history of putting up those gates, those obstacles, and being gatekeepers and keeping people out. And so until we really lean into that, right, and just own up to it, and then decide together that wasn't right, we know that wasn't right, why don't we really do something about that? And so it may look a little bit unequal to be equitable, right? It probably should. It definitely should if you look at the history of this country. So if we have an AP program somewhere, or a school somewhere in a gated community in this country that can raise money. So Dr. Lopez and Patrick, you brought up the scandal. There are people everywhere that can buy the access into, past these obstacles. And then there are places like here at home, here, where we don't have those opportunities. And that isn't what this country is based on. That's not the tenets, right? The basic foundation of what we all say we believe in. And I think the best parts of our country. So until we start looking at that, until we start having some courage and being brave and go, no, this community here, in Sunnyside, right? These, Mexicano, Latino students, the Latinx students, we would say now, these Native American students, from the Tohono O'odham Nation, who are, been here for generations, and forever. Like, let's really invest in them the way, we should have been doing the whole time. Because otherwise, we're just stacking up opportunity. If we're going to start doing everything equal, you're just stacking up more opportunities for folks that already generationally have had them. And unfortunately, we'll never have a real fair chance or opportunity for the hundreds and thousands of students that we know who are brilliant, we know can get this work done, we know who can lead this nation and are leading this nation. It's at least the ethics and the soul of this nation, we can see that in the way they stand up for their rights and stand up as proud Americans. And until we do that, until we look at those basic things and just decide who we want to be as a nation, I think we're gonna just paper over the cracks. And I'm not about that, and I don't think anybody on this panel is about it. But it starts with being a little bit. It starts with a little bit of courage that we have to, and we've got to get that courage from young ones, like our students here in Sunnyside and in Tucson.
Thank you, Dr. Acosta. Now, we're all aware of the Red Fred movement, and what have we learned after Red Fred? What were some of the takeaways? What were some of the missteps?
So I'll go ahead and start. I think what we learned is that there's a lot more people that care about what happens in our schools than a lot of people make you believe, right? The narrative around public education has been one of not very good things happening. I think as you saw some of the competitive models that have been embraced in our state, I think a lot of was formulated around a narrative that really is not accurate, that our public school systems are not good and are failing, and we have, believe me, we have a lot of work to do. I make no excuses for our performance. I know we can do better, but we have great kids coming out of our system, great students. We have great teachers. And I think what the Red movement did is help shine a light on some of the positive things that were happening, but it took a little bit more critical mass of folks really organizing around saying, hey, let's pay attention to what's real and not what you may be hearing that's been fabricated by those that want to dismantle this great foundational institution that's what has created the wonderful people that are sitting here, right? It's all started with public education. And so I think it's really has kept the conversation going on the front end, has exposed some inequities that have been going on in our state, and has begun to kind of start changing some attitudes that I think are hopefully with a continued part of that could be beneficial to us in the long run. I don't know, missteps I think is, I think sometimes the act of kind of getting involved maybe getting misinterpreted. So I think I wouldn't call it misstep, but I think we need to continue to explain those behaviors so that our narrative is being told by us and not by someone else. And I think many times we lose momentum, and as a result of losing momentum, it becomes someone else's story again. And so I think for me, I think the things that I would continue to encourage is to keep this topic on the radar so we can continue to do right by our students in this day and age where public education, it really is not what people are trying to make it out. It's a great system.
So when I was a student, and I'll try to stay on topic with the Red for Ed, but I remember just being shocked at learning about how the alarm about our education system was kind of on the mark with Sputnik, right, in 1957. And oh my gosh, we're failing. We're failing. We need to get better at science, math, engineering, or we're going to be left behind. And this rhetoric, if you look historically, has been year after year this alarmist narrative about how horrible our schools are performing. And yet if you look at reading, right, literacy, and math scores of our kids since the National Assessment of Educational Progress has collected data, which was 1969, it's an upward climb every single year. We're doing better, more students are graduating, and yet we keep hearing this narrative. We had a speaker come out who wrote a book, Democracy in Chains, in the fall. And she is a historian and found the roots that right after Brown v. Board of Education, was this small group of individuals who did not want their money, they were very wealthy, the 1%, did not want their money to have to fix schools for other people's children, right? We're seeing that today because it's a small group that has added to the rhetoric that we lead the nation in Arizona at defunding our schools. That's on purpose. It's intentional. And when you see Red for Ed here, you see it in Oklahoma, you saw it in West Virginia, we just saw it in Colorado, I think Oregon just had another Red for Ed. You're starting to see the symptoms of a system that has been in place for many, many years where the rhetoric has been, schools are failing, so let's add accountability to make sure they fail. When you have assessments to test kids and they're on a normal curve, it's impossible for 50% of them to be above average, statistically impossible. So it's a rigged system. It's a system that's made so half of the children will always be below average. So I think that the more we speak up against this system that has been imposed on our kids, where they took away recess. When I became a teacher many years ago in Texas, where we had George Bush as governor, then we had No Child Left Behind when he became president, he told me, if we don't test it, don't teach it. That's what I was told as a brand new teacher. And my little third graders were chewing up their pencils when they had to take the TOS, the assessment, because if they did not pass, they would not move on to the next grade. These are children. I mean, what we're doing in our education system is criminal, but it's not the teachers. It's not the school leaders, right? This is a system that's been imposed. So I think what we have to learn from Red for It is enough is enough. I think our voices are very important in how our children are educated. And I think the missteps are, it's a system that they had to combat, but they're out there again. So I see much more promise, and as much as I talk doom and gloom, the sparks that I saw was seeing the Sea of Red in Phoenix last year. I remember seeing that and thinking, that was so inspirational. The students at Parkland who stood up for what had happened, the students' bravery, that we're learning more from our youth than the adults we have in Washington, D.C. and in Phoenix, right? So that to me is, we need to really hang our hats on the hope and the example they are setting for the rest of us.
So I would just add to what you were saying, I think one of the key takeaways that I saw was just the power of a movement like that to impact change. Right, so I had the pleasure of attending the student panel earlier before this session, and there were some of the same questions being asked and why they get involved in their community and why do they get engaged. And it's just inspiring to hear them talk about the reasons why. We need more of that. We need our children to recognize that their voices can be heard, to go out and vote, right, to be part of that system and to make their voices heard. And I think the Red for Ed movement really showcased that if you can get a group of people together to advocate for something that you're passionate about, you can make real lasting change. And I think that's another way that we're gonna make change happen, right? From the historical perspective of some of our communities that may not be provided with the same opportunities as others. Get out there, talk about it, make movement happen. Right? I hope our younger generations really saw that as an opportunity for them to get even more engaged in the things that they're passionate about.
One of the things that we learned, I think, was that as a community, we can stand up for what we believe in, and that, like it was said, enough is enough. And a lot of this was, I felt that we're doing this for the future of our kids. We're doing this for what we want. We want it to just, it all stop and help our kids. I'm getting a little nervous. But it was something that cool that happened is that while this all was happening in Phoenix, we actually were having our Leadership Academy convening in Phoenix with a bunch of leaders from all over the nation trying to do some transformational work. So it was great to see everybody in downtown area together, and then seeing all this group of leaders trying to do this isolated work at the same time, but then we had this big massive people just coming together to make change, and it was very inspirational. And I don't know any missteps. I feel like we just have to keep the momentum going as well.
Yeah, I like that idea of momentum. and if I go back a year, I was really inspired, obviously, as well. Not being a high school teacher anymore wasn't really my choice. The state of Arizona made that very difficult because I was a Mexican American Studies teacher in Tucson Unified School District, and so I understand about these types of conditions that states can put upon us, lawmakers can put upon us, that are to the detriment of our youth very personally. But the one thing I beyond the inspiration is I was praying that the leadership wouldn't blink, because I really felt like the community was behind the movement, and it was and I was really proud of Superintendent Holmes, and how quickly he took a stand for our children. He understands the long game, and that comes at a huge cost and a huge. I'm sure he had to hear a lot of different, diverse opinions about whether his support for Ed was warranted or not. But he stood firm, and he made some really good decisions. Now, those weren't not all superintendents in this area were like that, and so that solidarity shows who he is. We need that kind of leadership, and I was hoping that the leadership of the movement wouldn't blink until the governor and the legislature committed, and I don't think they committed. I think and I understand. That's what I was hoping and praying for. But I also understand, it's hard not to blink sometimes. But if I go back to my own personal story with my colleagues, it took us 7 years to finally prove that the state was racist in what they did to us and dismantling our program, and we proved it in federal court. Not many people even know about that, because those kind of victories are usually papered over really fast and buried. But we won that, and we need to know that we have that strength, and that we can continue to stand firm even if it's uncomfortable. So I hope we keep the momentum, because we're not done yet. That was a start, not a finish. And I hope us, multi-generational as we are in this room, young folks all the way up to those of I got ganas coming in like big time, so I'm earning them. That we all have to stand firm in disrupting this trajectory of divesting from our children. That's what they've been doing since I've been teaching for 20-something years in this state now, and pushing 25, I think. And I have yet to see a real commitment by the legislature, by a governor, to for an extended period of time to recuperate what we've been losing for decades now. And so we got to keep it going. We got to keep that momentum.
Thank you. Now, what is the biggest challenge our public schools face today? What do we have the resources to take on? And is there a low-hanging fruit? What is the biggest challenge our public schools face today? What do we have the resources to take on? And is there a low-hanging fruit?
I feel like Steve mentioned it earlier, I think we all mentioned it, that whole attitude towards public education, that it's a failure when it's not. And we have very great stories to tell, and and we do have great resources. We have our community, and I feel like we need to use that to our advantage. And I mean, we're an organization that helps students with that, and I feel like Ken told me to tell you guys that you're very fortunate to have Steve be that superintendent to want to make your school district into a 21st century education district, and because there's about 14,000 of them, and only 500 of them are doing this type of work. It could be 21st century education, but it could just be trying to just change from the old school model that we've been doing for a a lot of years. So I feel like
So I'll add on to that. I think doing some of the things that we're currently doing just amplified. So I look at the partnership that we as a company, Raytheon, have built with the Sunnyside District and seeing more of that. What happened tonight with all the students and the tutors from Raytheon is amazing to see. And we're really trying to build that pipeline of next generation of STEM leaders. Where as a company, we're very dedicated to that. We're putting a lot of resources behind that because we recognize that it's not only important for our community to build that and put resources back into the community, but also as well from a company perspective is building our own talent pipeline and making sure that we also have that longevity and that we're working with schools to develop curriculum that will also help guide us in the future. So those strong industry partnerships are incredibly valuable. We were talking about some of the other programs that we have where we support our teachers as well, whether it's providing funding back for our teachers and the schools that they work at, as well as we have a program where we bring teachers who are getting their masters at U of A onto our campus during the summer to actually work on our program so they get to see firsthand how the concepts that they're teaching in the classroom apply in the real world scenario in the professional environment and be able to pass that on to students. I think that kind of partnership is invaluable, and I think we can do even more.
That was a really good answer again about the low-hanging fruit, because I was stumped. Those three questions are huge. But you're right. Starting here is the gifts we have in this school district is a good way to think about it. You have a lot of talent here. I remember being in my classroom. I'd look at my students the first day, and I'd get kind of weird with them sometimes. Like the Matrix, kind of like being like a shaman or like what was it? What was the name of the Oracle? And I would literally see them, and I would think to myself, and I'd say it out loud too, because I wanted to trip them out. I'd be like, "You don't know how great you are and what you're gonna be, but I do." And I'd look right in their eyes and point at them, "I do," and they'd be like, "Oh, it's weird," but it's true. It's true, and they don't, and they don't often hear that either. So it's really important that not only do we say it, but we also have to pull it off, right? We have to engage the students. We have to get them excited about what they're learning about, right? We have to be better as teachers to know how we need to be innovative, how that innovation could lead to more rigorous practices so our students, I know I have a good friend right over there, Ricardo Dominguez, right? He's a Sunnyside graduate, and he's brilliant. And I'm so lucky to know him and watch him as a young leader grow, him in his own career. His comadre is a PhD graduate, right? She got her PhD, Karina. Yeah, Karina, they grew up together, both Sunnyside graduates, right? From our program at the university, from Dr. Lopez's program. We have them in our midst, right? They went to school, they grew up together, but they even, when they left, it was a shock, it was a culture shock to them when they went to the university, and in Ricky's case, he wasn't ready, and you hear this a lot, right? And one of the things about the MAS program when I was a teacher, we got them ready, because that's a huge jump, because our university still it doesn't know how to engage our children our young people once they make it over there. And that's something we got to work on at the U of A. But anyways, so there's a lot we still have to do, but there's a strength here that the youth here need to know. They need to see it. They not only need to hear it, but they need to see it themselves, because they're gonna do some brilliant stuff and then doubt themselves, because we get these images about who we are from the media and from other places and spaces, and we start internalizing that. We start believing we can't. Even when you're like, "Look what you just did." Nah, it's just lucky. That's literally what our young ones do when they do something brilliant in the classroom. You go to a place where I also taught, University High School. I taught for 2 years there, right? Against my will. It's a different story. But I learned a lot. Those students don't react that way. They go, "Of course I'm brilliant." I mean, they're more humble than that out loud. But they have that confidence. And our students, they have so many other gifts that are just as brilliant as those students, but they don't see it. And then once they experience it, they don't know necessarily if it was them or not. So there's a whole different kind of mindset we have to like start working with. We have to start doing that heart work as well as that academic work for our young ones to really grow on that sunny side strength.
I think, gosh, my mind went so many different places in terms of like low-hanging fruit and where can we start. And I think that if we think about the rhetoric against public education, and yet we see these teachers who walk into class every day, buy supplies out of their own pocket, I think we're hard-pressed to find commitment like that in other areas, right? Like this is their life, and people don't do that kind of life's work if they don't believe in the children that they're teaching. And it's interesting because I think as human beings, we tend to think that we're the only ones that believe something, and then we hear it from other people, and we start to see this critical mass, kind of like, again, the way we saw with Red for Ed. And lately, that's what's been happening to me. We've had conversations. I talk to other people, and I have conversations like, there's a lot of people who feel this way. If we can continue that spark, we can change the tide. I mean, I've been waiting for the tide to change for some time now, but I think enough of us believe in this that I think it's just a matter, yay for signing up to vote. That has to be a contagion. I think our voices can be heard, and so that excites me.
Today's Patrick's birthday, in case you guys don't want to know. We wish him happy birthday. Turned 18 today. I think just quickly, the number of people going into public education as teachers has dwindled significantly, and that's a very big problem that we have. And I think it's we have to change people's attitudes around it. It's a very rewarding career. Yeah, the pay has kind of shifted. There's some movements that we're trying to do internally to make sure it's attractive financially. I think we're on the verge of doing that by repurposing some of our resources and hopefully pushing others to bring more resources. But at the end of the day, we also have to get out there on a better platform to talk about how great teaching is as a career, right? I think that has to be contagious in what we say around teaching, because all you hear is, man, it's hard, there's not enough pay, and all those are all very real stories, but we don't capture all the wonderful stories that teachers say every day around, what they love and how rewarding, and the kids that make them happy and smile every day, and where are those stories that actually can continue to be momentum around a very beautiful career that I think could be helpful, as simple as that sounds, but changing the narrative around what it is to be a teacher and how really rewarding it is, and not focusing all these negative things that continue to be part of what people are talking about. And so let's change what people are talking about.
Thank you. Now, what have you come to expect from Sunnyside graduates? What sets them apart?
I can talk the whole day. As a former alumni here, I know there's great strength in our community. And it's hard for me to shape it because I see it every day, and some of those intangibles in my interaction with students each and every day. I'm on our campuses a lot, particularly our high school campuses, and I have great hope for our nation as I look at kind of what I read in the news, and we see that. But what Sunnyside brings as a community and what we have in terms of our strengths are game changers for this country. I mean that. It sounds so like, okay, this is big deal. Like this. I mean that with all great sincerity and great hope, because I see the students like Patrick, and it's my job to give them those opportunities so they can shine, right? So others notice what Sunnyside has, because there are great gifts, right? There are people out there that came, and when you say you're from Sunnyside, there's kind of these 6 degrees of separation from so many people that are in different organizations. Yeah, I went to Sunnyside, or my dear went to Sunnyside. Yeah, I graduated, and I think what I know to be a great strength is a great sense of community and understanding, deep understanding around identity, around who they are in this community. And that's a huge asset that we have yet to capitalize on since, well, I think we're coming up at 100 years here pretty soon, right? And how can we kind of make sure that story doesn't get lost as we're kind of celebrating the fact that we've got some great people have come out of Sunnyside. And so what I hope is that more stories are told, that our students and people that come from our community that are in positions of power and different positions actually reflect back in some way. We gather that story. I mean, we've been big on, Victor and I, on this idea of storytelling. But if I look at the judges, right, Congress people, I mean, all these people that are coming from Sunnyside, yet there's not a storyline, right? It's the humanity of us knowing each other and kind of saying and giving a hug when we see each other, hey, from Sunnyside. But I think the hope that I have is that these stories become much more part of what gets told, and pushing our alumni, quite frankly, to be part of that storytelling around why they're where they're at and what role Sunnyside played in that.
So I'll just share the person that Dr. Acosta alluded to. I'll just explain that at the university setting, to get a position as a professor, it is extremely rare for an institution to hire back someone who's graduated from there. I don't know why. It's some weird, rule. And there was a student from Sunnyside, so spectacular that all these other institutions wanted to poach her. I mean, and I'm not kidding. She's at the University of Michigan right now doing some statistical work. And we wanted to be sure we had her because she is that spectacular. And she's emblematic, I think, of you're included in there, like that are so committed. And I think the raíces are deep here, right? And I think that's so important because people want to come back and nurture the educational system and community that gave them a lot of what they are. And that is soon to be Dr. Salazar's life's work. She wants to make sure. So her research is going to examine why recruiters go off to the more higher socioeconomic status places when you've got what she calls purple unicorns, which are your stellar students in places like purple unicorns. And she talked about her own experiences, and she is one of these individuals that wants to change this, right? And that's what I see in the Sunnyside graduates, is that they see something wrong with the system, so they're gonna change it. And so she's gonna get to be with us in the fall, so that's what I come to expect, and I'm gonna recruit you next, so.
No, we're gonna recruit him next. Come to Raytheon. So I'll hear it later if from my mom, who's a public educator in the audience, if I don't state this, but I am the product of public education as well. I'm a Tucson native. I graduated from CDO High School, went to Pima, U of A, did the whole round. And I actually was on this campus a lot during the summertime when I played club volleyball. We used to practice at Sunnyside, and I had several friends that were very close to me that were Sunnyside students, Sunnyside High School students. And so not only from my friends growing up to interns that we see come into the organization and hires that we bring in, I've seen an incredible amount of drive and passion and dedication. I mean, there's a sense of loyalty that is bred in this community that is really hard to replicate in other areas. And we want to hold on to that. I mean, it's a unique internal kind of drive that really makes for a great team member, a great leader, and somebody that's willing to really do what's necessary to be successful in an organization. And it's pretty incredible to see. So that's what we've come to expect, and we know we'll continue to see it.
Well, I know that this community has great values, and we should use a lot of them. One of them that's very important to me is family, and I see it here in the district. And I feel like what Steve was saying about bringing graduates back and telling their story is very important, because I feel, I don't know, I'm the type of person that, or the student that I was very discouraged, and just knowing stories here and there of success of other people that came to the Sunnyside or were connected or partnered with them in a way, which would have been great to know you knew these people, was great for me to like just push me to go through college and to better my career. And I feel like I'm coming back to my community. So thank you so much for inviting me, because I love doing this. I want to help out in my community. And going back to family, I have 2 siblings in the district. So it's like doing this for them, or just, is something that I value a lot. And I see it in every single student here too. And we should use it to our advantage. And I really hope that other graduates do the same, because we are only bettering our own community and the future of the students that are currently in the district, and are going to be great assets for us in the future. So, yeah.
I'll just add real quickly, because Dr. Lopez said like it was perfect. I was gonna say something. I guess I am gonna still say something similar, but she nailed it when she said the raíces, or in deep here. That's real obvious to me too. It's I always feel when I meet Sunnyside graduates and alumnus that they're real grounded. They're grounded people, no matter how like highfalutin their jobs may be, right? They're just still really cool, like really like they know who they are. There's like a calmness to them, that. So like, as much as like there's work to do, Steve and I have already, all of us to a degree have talked about the work we have left to do to like get the most out of the youth here. There's also a gift that's already here that you can't replicate, right? That loyalty, but also that groundedness, so that you're calm because you know who you are and where you're from, and then you take it wherever you go. And that's something that's really, so you can chop it up, you can talk with people without putting on airs, and that's just really for a person that, that sometimes gets into these situations where you're talking to people in places that aren't very comfortable for me, that are that people call elite. That's not how I keep score anymore. It never really is. It's about folks that know who they are, and are trying with everything they do to pay it back, right? And it goes beyond service. It's a way of being, and so that to me, Sunnyside graduates, Sunnyside alumni, they're more like that than many people I run into.
How should school districts engage with families? What are some bright spots? What do you sense families are looking to us to improve?
I think it should have gone to you, but
Take it.
yeah, you take it.
Okay.
We're processing.
What I know deep down is our families trust us, right? And that's been part of the culture and family, that they trust the system to do right by their kids. And I take that responsibility very, very serious, right? And that's I think why at the core, when we have students that fail in our system, that we take it real personally, because we've got our challenges, right? And but at the fundamental reciprocity in our relationship is, you're going to take care of my kid and educate him at the best, and we're going to give you the support that you need. That's at the core of this relationship between our families. And of course, there's times that it's uneasy and we don't do our part. There's times that parents struggle to do their part. But I think that reciprocity runs really deep in the expectations of how we work with our families. I think where we've have our continued challenges is really helping understand what it means to be engaged in our schools as well. That's, I think, our continued struggle, because that looks differently, particularly in communities like ours, where you have families who are trying to make ends meet, right? And as a result of that, their lack of presence doesn't mean a lack of engagement, right? And so how do you rectify that in a system that rewards families who are present versus rewarding families who are deeply engaged in their students? And how do you differentiate between those two concepts, right? And so that's an educational process that we're still undertaking. That's part kind of our core beliefs around how we think about families, how we think about engagement, and really getting to a point as an organization that we're okay with what you can give, right? And that I think is just some mindset shifts that I think are not unique just to our community, but unique to communities that look like ours. But it's something that I still think, as an educational system, we don't fully understand, and therefore have to continue to educate, right? That we're a learning system, so no one comes here with a fixed sets of skills and attributes that aren't going to be worked upon. And so, kind of piggybacking really briefly on the first question of equity, one thing that we are really pushing in terms of our approach to equity is a work on dispositions for equity, and really thinking about what is it going to take for those that work in the system to understand what equity means, and more importantly, what does that mean to be someone that's, what's the dispositions we want from people that are going to work with our kids, right? And those dispositions are things that we're starting to provide clarity around, so that we can define it, teach, and hold people accountable to those dispositions. Because at the end of the day, it's not these great pictures and things that we hang on the wall. It's the behaviors and interaction that our students are having with our teachers in the presence of that content in the classroom. And so that's fundamentally how we're looking at that. And that disposition, it ties back to how we think about families.
So I'm going to put my parent hat on because I have 3 kids. One is now a freshman at the U of A, one's a junior, one's a 6th grader. And I think families expect, at least for me, I think there's a social contract that I expect that when I have my kids at school, that they will be treated with the love and dignity, right, that they would get in our home. When I was a teacher, that was the expectation. I saw them as my kiddos, right? They were mine, and I think I worry about situations that I've encountered in the school system where children weren't treated the way we would treat our own children. We're seeing more of that on the news with like lunches, and it's in loco parentis, right? It's like when children are in a school, they should be treated as the children and the parents are in the school. And so I think if we have that frame of mind, and I totally agree with the disposition component, because for too long we see inequity, and we were having this conversation. We live in a society where we're showered with images, and we all have biases that need to be undone. No one is excluded from that, because we see it in film and what is represented. We read it. It didn't occur to me until much later in life that I had not read or walked into a Barnes & Noble and saw a Latina author. Like, never even occurred to me until I became conscious of that kind of stuff. Things, and you mentioned privilege, Dr. Costa, like being aware of our own, we all have different kinds of privilege, right? And I think that to do that kind of work and truly engage with children and love them as our own, we need to undo a lot of that work. The damage that's done just by living in a society that portrays some things as ideal and others that are not.
So I also thought about this question from the parent perspective. I have 2 little boys. My oldest just is wrapping up being in kindergarten. So fairly new to the whole school system, and it's very exciting, very nerve-wracking. But going back to your comment, that open lines of communication I have found to be extremely important. And you hear it all the time that it takes a community to raise our children, and it really does. We're very fortunate to have grandparents and aunts and uncles also engaged and helping with that education of our children to help really round out the full experience. And I know that not everybody's that fortunate. You know, we have a lot of people that relocate to Tucson to work at Raytheon, so I see the other side of that where they're more isolated. And so I think the more that we can also do to truly step up as a community, the more we're going to help uplift all of our children and help them be successful.
So I feel like, well, we could expect families for the district to prepare students for the future. And then I feel like going back to what you were saying about we can only expect so much from parents, right? And I had that. I had working mom and working dad, and sometimes it was hard to coordinate rides to school and stuff like that. So I feel back to that equity piece, it's like, how can we make sure that we make a fair field for students with certain obstacles, and that teachers and staff and the entire system understands them and finds a way to just provide what each student needs based on what their situation is. So I feel that's very important, and that's what's needed, and I see it, but yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done for that.
I'm really lucky and blessed to be working with Challenger Middle School right now, and they have a great new leader over the last couple of years, Angelica Duddleston, and they're being brave about like trying to engage the families, you know, because they're going out there, and I'm sure they're getting like doors, you know, metaphorically slammed in their face, or like lack of, perhaps once in a while, maybe not a response that they were hoping for, but they're doing that work. They're getting out there, and they've actually had a couple of events where they've shared with us that that's really exciting, and you know, so being able to work with them and just, you know, to fuel that and to listen and see how we can build upon that is really an exciting opportunity for Patricia and myself in being partners with Sunnyside and partners with Challenger. And the other piece is the dispositions piece. You know, Steve, we actually started hearing the last time we were there, which was last month, like them making connections on their own between what we were bringing to the table and what you all have been doing as well. And so when you start hearing it, coming from the teachers, that they're starting to build this idea, they're trying to build this like toolkit, if you will, about like how to better engage students, how to see them with a cultural asset-based lens, how to see them, all the cultural wealth they bring to the table, and how to start building upon that and applying it in the classroom, because that's going to be the key. And that's actually what we found when we were really rocking it back in the day in Mexican American Studies, is like students came home so excited. They were telling their parents all about what they were doing. So when we asked them to come to one of our encuentros, it was like slammed. Like we had like, I taught at Tucson High. You know, it's a big school, a big cafeteria. Many of you probably have been there. It was packed with our gente, packed with all our families. And we didn't do like those things that, you know, those structural barriers, like about, you know, that we feel like on parent like conference night and stuff. We're like, bring the babies, it's all good. We'll bring food, we'll like potluck, you know, the more babies better. And we actually use that opportunity with the young ones, the ones that are elementary school and younger. We would have our students and some of our colleagues who were elementary school teachers turn into a little MAS class right there for them. They would do projects together while we were working with the families, and the students were sharing with their parents what they were learning in the classroom, and everyone was getting excited. It felt like we were winning. And I think that once, you know, so I'm seeing the baby steps of that at Challenger, and I know that's something here. Y'all love a winner. I mean, because you've had many, you know, athletically speaking especially, and we can do that with academics here as well. It's a similar lens.
Well, unfortunately, we reached the end of this great panel discussion. Let's give all our panelists a great round of applause, everybody.
Steve, I'm going to let you have the last word, but just before we leave, I just want to acknowledge everyone who's here, as well as our board members, Ms. Evadong, Ms. Becky Quintero, Mr. Buck Crouch. Thank you for joining us today. I also want to acknowledge Mr. Dan Rice from Raytheon, who literally comes to all of our math nights and is a huge partner in the work. I want to acknowledge all of our administrators who are here, and all of our teachers and all of our families. I hope that what you're taking today, you could take home today, is that the future of public education is bright, and we want to be able to take this show on the road. And we need all of you, and thank you so much for giving us of your time. And I'm going to turn it over to Steve so he can send us off. Thanks.
Just real quick, I do want to thank my comadres, compadres, and our panel here who are now kind of becoming close, because this is the work, right? This is about building this coalition of people who think about our schools in this way, and how can we continue to capitalize on this relationships that's part of, deeply rooted in what Sunnyside is, to really do right by our students and to do right by our kids, because we have work to do. I'm very proud of some of our students and what they've done specifically, but I'm also proud of the students that haven't been on the radar too. And so that's where it becomes that kind of storytelling that needs to go be out there. I need all of your help. The more we can share this information out there, what we're attempting to do, I think is critically important, because I think we're on the verge of really, really making a huge impact in this space called public education that unfortunately has not been front and center for many people thinking about where innovation lies, and I think it lies here. And I want to thank Patrick as well, who's going to be leaving us. That's going to be a hard one for me because he started with me as the superintendent. So that's going to be 4 years of seeing this young man grow into the leader that he currently is, and will continue to be. Because we're not, we always say we're not building future leaders, right? The leaders are here now, right? We just need to help nurture their leadership in ways that in the past we've hindered. And so thank our governing board for actually supporting this work, because they're at the core of helping me kind of think through and be patient with some of the sometimes crazy ideas that maybe I have, but more importantly, they're great sounding boards, and talk about a great relationship in the work really comes from having a good governing board that actually is thinking about the work in the same way, and our Sunnyside alumni too. So that we're in the right place to do some great work. We just got to capitalize on it and not kind of rest on some of the great little things that we're doing, but really push us to be better. So thank you.